Hello, everyone. We're back again on the Rivalry CS channel. I'm, of course, Richard Lewis, and a very special interview today, one I didn't think I'd ever be doing within a Counter-Strike context.
I'm glad we are.
Yeah, it's crazy. You probably recognize him immediately. There's, of course, MonteCristo, very famous for his time in League of Legends, where he was, the big chief over there, and then, of course, moved to Overwatch, and now is making his, kind of debut in CS events over at the Flashpoint League. So very exciting time for all of us. Christopher, wonderful to have you here. Let's get into it, man. I mean, I wanted to make this interview kind of more thematically about the future, because I think that's what people are intrigued about. And you've never been backwards about coming forwards, so you've definitely expressed your opinions about Overwatch. But I think we got to touch upon that a little bit just to kind of set the scene. It seems to me incredible because you were one of the first big names attached to Overwatch. I think you've been one of its biggest advocates, even sometimes when it's been difficult to advocate for. I think you were a sort of consummate professional the entire time you were over there. And that seems to have been rewarded in the most terrible of ways. And now you're no longer attached to it. So I've got to ask, what the hell was going on over there?
I think it was, for me, I was one of the first 4 people with the league, with Doa and me and Nate Nanzer and Marissa Palumbo, who is a producer for Team 4, which is the development team for Overwatch. Mm-hmm. And the way that Doa and I were brought in was as consultants in addition to being casters. Like, we had a lot of input in the beginning in terms of how the league was going to shake out. I was used to help new sports teams who were buying into esports for the first time. Like, I was used to consult with them in order to set up their infrastructure, because they didn't know what they were doing. Like, who should they hire in terms of what roles do they need filled? How do they structure an esports team? Because I used to own one. So they used me pretty heavily in a lot of that format details with the league, talking about various operational things. And so we, on our first contract, which was 2 years for 2017, even though there wasn't an Overwatch League season then, Doa and I moved back to the States in April, I believe. And so we were helping out with a lot of that stuff. And then we were doing contenders and we didn't have signing authority for any of the other casters, but we were advising on that.
Right.
And just kind of working and helping to set everything up and get the ideas in place. And basically after that contract, we signed an additional 1-year contract for 2019. Didn't have the consulting end anymore. Nate Nanzer, our commissioner, left halfway through the season. Nate was the guy that I really trusted at the league. He was the one with a creative vision. It was not great when Nate left on the production side. And as far as I can tell from watching it, even though I haven't watched it a ton, still isn't great on the production side.
There've been a few mistakes, some teething problems, I'd say, which is crazy when we're talking about it 3 years in.
Yes. So I really wanted, in terms of career growth, like, I don't want to just be a caster. That's not my ambition in life. I've done that for 15 years now. When I started casting Warcraft 3, I'm not interested in just being trotted out there. I want to actually have creative input and get my hands dirty and do some of the producer work in terms of the broadcast. And I don't mind going to meetings, and I don't mind writing up outlines and documents and like figuring out how to, doing shot lists for videos and thinking about features. So I enjoy doing all of that. So I wanted to do more. And basically they didn't want me to do more. They don't have any casters in terms of like creative direction meetings. So you hire, Overwatch League hired, probably one of the most experienced groups of casters on the planet, who all have done other roles in the past, whether we've run our own content companies like Semler with Room on Fire, or Puckett was a literal VP of content at MLG. Obviously, I have experience running my own content, running my own websites with other content creators. So I think that it was silly that you get all these esports veterans and then you don't even include them in any kind of conversation about creative direction for the broadcast. And, at a certain point, like, that was just, it's not what I want. So it was time to go. And I think what's been great about working with Flashpoint is that after talking to a bunch of the team owners in Overwatch League and them understanding what I wanted to do, they were really supportive, especially C9 and Gen G, about bringing me in and saying, well, you can't do this with Overwatch League, but we believe that you are competent when it comes to this stuff, so let's bring you in on this front. And for Counter-Strike, it was something that I always had been really excited about doing, but I never could. I mean, I could own a team, which I did. As it was, I was really focused on getting into the scene in that way. But for me, when I lived in Korea, I couldn't cast Counter-Strike because there was no Counter-Strike besides like the random Asia minor that was being held there. Yep. OGN wasn't doing it, so I never really had an opportunity. And because I was doing League, and League is like the season of League, especially if you're going to Worlds and MSI, which I was at the time, is, goes from January to November or October. So I can't just like leave Korea and run a Counter-Strike circuit, right? Because I'm just casting week in and week out there. And then when I got back to the States, I was signed for Overwatch League and I couldn't do it. So I never really had the opportunity to do Counter-Strike, even though I always really loved the game.
Yeah. I want to just sort of touch upon something you said earlier there, where you talked about, this assembly of, all these like great names and, like you say, people who aren't just commentators, people who've done multiple games. Cause obviously you're not just about League of Legends, you go by, you've done Warcraft. I think, did you do StarCraft as well?
I did with OGN. Yeah.
StarCraft too. So you've done multiple games, lots of different high level types of games. But as well as that, the understanding of what it is to run a stable of talent or to be able to produce content itself, knowing what works with an audience, knowing what is good shoulder content. I think those hires were very deliberate by the Overwatch League to get people that weren't just popular, but also had that broad skill set. And then they didn't implement any of it, which is the crazy part. But then on top of that, it's like those are the guys that end up leaving and kind of getting cast out. So I guess the question is, do you feel used in one way and underutilized in the other? It's kind of a weird mix, right?
I just think that the more people who are non-esports endemic that ended up coming in over time to the Overwatch League, you could just feel not only my influence, but Nate Danzer's influence waning. And like, I'm not here to speculate on why Nate went to Epic, but it wouldn't surprise me if that was part of it.
Sure.
I really think that a lot of the hires that Overwatch League has done have not been optimal for creating an experience for hardcore esports fans. And I think that the product itself really lacks creative direction and vision. Like, I can't even really tell you what it is right now, or what its purpose is, or who its audience is supposed to be. And that's not something that I like. So I think I'm much more passionate about, hey, let's do this cool thing with Flashpoint where we try and push the envelope and we see where can we go with something brand new in esports, which is an esports broadcast exclusively aimed at adults and kind of a more raw tone. And I think we're going to be very experimental with that. And I think it's going to be interesting to see if it works. Like, I don't know if it's going to work, but I think it's cool that the ownership group believes in this creative vision and is okay with us pursuing it, because it's not something that most people would have the stomach for.
Do you think there is a sort of fundamental difference now, kind of a split in the types of ownership that there are in esports? That there are people that kind of, seem very attracted to the Activision Blizzard model of just having these kind of like, almost like sterile franchises that are new brands. You kind of run them, but you will make some money maybe somewhere down the road. But right? Like I'm seeing this obviously in Call of Duty. I'm seeing more and more people kind of lean towards that model as a suggested idea. It's even been talked about in Counter-Strike. Or there's these owners that are like willing to kind of like roll the dice and take a risk on, more kind of edgy, uncertain, games like we're seeing with the ownership group that have attached themselves to Flashpoint, and I suppose to a lesser extent the ESL Pro League
sure
as well.
I think that what I've always wanted to have happen is for a conglomerate of teams to collectively own a tournament series or a league or whatever, because that's what we have with like the NBA and the NHL and the NFL, right? It's a team conglomerate that actually owns them. And the reason why I'm excited about this is because I think the teams know esports better than the developers. And obviously the problem we run into with developers is that they own the intellectual property, which is the whole core problem of esports. Like if you look at the number one problem esports has, is that the devs own the IP, so they have total control over what happens. Nobody owns the intellectual property to American football, which is why the XFL can start this year and we can have a different league than the NFL, right? They don't have to pay anybody anything for that. It's just if you have the players and you can assemble the teams, then you can do it. Now, you obviously can't do that in League of Legends. Otherwise, people would have definitely done it if they could have.
Yeah, sure.
Because
I hate this developer tyranny, honestly.
I hate it too.
Yeah,
it's the reason is not that I hate developers. No. I mean, I do kind of hate Riot, but I don't hate the development team that makes Overwatch. In fact, I really like the leadership of the team that makes Overwatch. I think they're very intelligent and thoughtful. But this comes with a big but. I don't think developers, their core competency, their business is not making an esports league. It's making a game. And I think that what developers do in the absence of, so when you are new, let's say you're Activision Blizzard, let's like think about this. So there was a smaller esports team that used to exist, but they spun out an entirely separate division that actually reports to the Activision executives, not the Blizzard executives. Yeah. So when you look at Call of Duty and Overwatch League, those people are not reporting to Blizzard executives. They're reporting to, I think, the CFO of Activision, who then reports to Bobby Kotick, who's the CEO. So it's like an entirely separate wing that they spun up. But the problem with doing this is what happens is they got a bunch of traditional sports people, and to my knowledge, there's not a lot of endemic esports people. I don't know any endemic esports people in the leadership of Activision.
I don't think there are any.
I don't know. As far as I know, there aren't. I don't know the CDL side as well, because I kind of like left while that was spinning up. But as far as I know, there are none. And I'm incredulous that there are like 0 people that are qualified for those. Like in my mind, endemic esports people should have been the first people recruited into those roles. And then, if you can't find somebody who's qualified, then maybe you dip into traditional sports, but you don't have like an exclusively non-endemic esports leadership team. That's crazy. Right. Yeah. That's actually crazy. Because you have nobody who understands how the market developed, why certain things happen. And it's the same shit that when Riot was developing their broadcast team, and instead of like going to OGN and being like, hey, OGN, what did you learn from your 20 years of broadcasting esports? They're like, nah, we can just do it better. And they just never really learned anything. Yeah. So this is all to say that I think developers are great at developing games, but being an entertainment television product is not what they do. And in order to get into that space, they make a lot of mistakes in hiring leadership to get there. And they don't have the level of competency in the esports entertainment space. And instead of looking at things and saying, who is popular, who is making what's popular, why is it popular, and emulating it, then these traditional sports people, they try and emulate traditional sports, which just fails. Yeah. Or it's not, and people will be like, oh, well, esports is exploding in popularity. Look at League of Legends. But you're always waiting there for the other question, which is, how big could it have been if they did it a different way? Exactly. Like, yes, you could make something that's successful and it's not optimal. And so I think that the teams, my experience with the teams is that they understand their audience because their job is to be in touch with the hardcore esports demographic. When you think about esports teams, every single esports team, this is unusual by traditional sports standards, has their own content platform. Like, content is king in esports in a way that esports teams produce more content themselves than most traditional sports teams do. So their expertise, they've already gone through the process of like figuring out hey, what content works with this game's audience? And in my experience, all the teams are very thoughtful about, we make this content for the Counter-Strike audience. It has this tone, or like we're creating this entirely separate channel for this game. Like look at Team Liquid. They've split off all their various divisions into even different Twitter profiles. So they have different tones throughout all of that. There's a real strategy, and the teams have and they all communicate with each other. So for me, the teams are they're much more plugged in to the fan base and to what the audience wants and to what the players want from the games. Like they can go directly to the players so easily and say hey, what do you think about, this aspect of the format? And the developers do talk to the players, not to say that they don't, but the ease of access is definitely way, way better for the teams. And I just believe that they are fundamentally better at operating a league because it's their teams and their players who are in the league, and they can make rules that make sense for the audience, for their players, for their business model. And you can cut out all the stupid, useless middlemen. ESL, any production company, it's not just ESL, any production company is not necessary, which is what the devs figured out. The devs figured this out and brought it all in-house, right? Now, I don't think they should have done that. In the MonteCristo tier list of things that I want to work for now, as I've learned, it's dev operated broadcast is lowest. Then it's production company like ESL, NGE, which are fine to work with. I don't want to shit on them. They have their expertise, but I don't think that. I think you could literally just hire those people away from those companies and then just not give them a cut. Why do I need ESL making a profit? I don't. And then right now it's the team operated and co-team owned stuff because I think that they are the most savvy when it comes to the space.
Yeah. So the one question just on the developer theme, and then we'll start transitioning into talking about CS, is the thing that I always find the most egregious, that I dislike most of all, is that, listen, sure, it's your game, it's your intellectual property, control it. You give out the license to who can host a tournament. Sometimes this is held back for spiteful reasons. Sometimes it's held back for very good reasons for the scene. For example, we saw Valve intervene in CS and say we're not going to give licenses for anybody that's going to peddle exclusivity,
which I think is great.
Yeah, exactly. They're saying, listen, it has to be come one, come all. Competition's good. That's our ethos. But the thing that I really don't like, and Valve are as guilty of this as any other developer, is this idea that if a person sort of strays away from the party line, they can become persona non grata. They're not allowed to create content. They're not allowed to appear on broadcasts. It doesn't matter what their expertise is, what they've contributed to the scene. They just get cast out into oblivion, and the only realistic career choice for them is to go across to another game. And I'm sure you've got some insight into this, because I'm pretty sure, unless Riot are going to be, hey, all past transgressions are forgiven when Project A comes rolling around. You've been there with Riot for a variety of reasons. All of them seem to be very spiteful and petty. And I think if Valve were a little bit more in that ilk, they are when it comes to Dota. But if they were with CS, people like me and Duncan probably would never appear on a broadcast.
Right.
Right. So, we'd be in that oblivion. So I want to pick your brains about that. And do you think that's something developers need to transition away from? Do you think they're perfectly well within their rights? It's actually a positive thing, or what do you?
No, obviously I don't. I think that there's a difference between the aim of an intellectual property and the aim of an esports entertainment broadcast. And I don't think that you should be exiled. And to be clear, my personal goals are not to cast for Project A. So I don't really care. And also in terms of my current relationship with Riot, most of the people that did the things to me are no longer there.
Yeah.
They were fired mostly, which was, I think, inevitable, because I don't think that these people were competent, or they got out before they could get fired. So actually, my relationship with Riot is pretty good right now. I have friends at Riot. I like most of the other casters there. I talk to people at Riot now that I'm in Los Angeles on a pretty regular basis. So yeah, I don't really have that many problems with Riot as it is. And for what it's worth, Riot had to approve me being on Twitch Rivals because they are a partner in that production for League of Legends, and they did. So what would happen if I requested to cast Project A? I don't know. I'm not going to do that. I don't want to work with them. I would rather make my own content about Project A. Like the nice thing about my position now is that with Cloud9, I can just build out my own content, and we're building a studio for Cloud9 that I can use. So why would I agree to do things Riot's way when I can just do whatever I want the way I want to do it?
Yeah.
So there's no point for me to be on their broadcasts. Like, I don't want the prestige. I've already cast, I've already been on the desk for 3 world finals. Like, that's not an ambition of mine. My ambition is to make Monte content. So anyway, to answer your question though, it's that aspect I think is pretty bullshit, that they can just get rid of people. And also, it doesn't even make sense a lot of the time, because this is another reason why they shouldn't be allowed to run broadcasts, because they don't run them like an entertainment product.
Yeah.
You know who's obnoxious? Many professional actors. You know who still gets hired? All those professional actors. Because, and I'm not talking about like the criminal ones or like the big scumbag ones, but a lot of creative people are difficult to work with because their success has come off of being uncompromising on a vision of who they are or what they're going to do. And if you get rid of those people, then you lose all the interest. And also, just fundamentally, what is fun and interesting about somebody when you're watching them on camera for 5 minutes might be super annoying or obnoxious in real life for the 12 hours a day that you spend with them.
Yeah.
But you have to just take that, because you have to just deal with it, because you realize that those 5 minutes on camera are so good for the audience when they're not exposed to it like people on the broadcast are all the time. So I think that tossing people out for being difficult is an incredible disservice to the entertainment value of the broadcast, because then you scare people, so they never want to say anything interesting, or they never want to say anything controversial. So you're basically creating something that is against the interests of your audience. And we saw this in Overwatch, and I think I knew that coming in it was going to be an uphill battle, particularly with the Overwatch IP, and here's why. Not all intellectual properties are like this. Like this problem doesn't exist with League of Legends, but with Overwatch, the whole concept of the IP is that it's some sort of super inclusive future. And I like that about the IP. I do. I think it's like a really cool and interesting vision of the future for Overwatch. Yeah. But when you try and turn that into an esport, you know what the least inclusive thing in the universe is? Sports, competition.
True.
We are literally watching the 0.001%, the ultra elite. And if you are not the best, get the fuck out. There is nothing inclusive about professional sports. So when you have to make and the people who watch professional sports enjoy that, right? So how do you create a product where the player base likes this inclusive feel, but to turn it into a sport, you have to have a level of banter and trash talk and extremely like intense competition. You have to say people are good. You have to say people are bad. And how do you do that in the context of the Overwatch IP? That's where I think like the concept of sports and Overwatch as an IP have a very difficult time being compatible with each other. And I think a lot of the time there was a conflict there between the stakeholders for the intellectual property at Blizzard and a lot of the ideas we had for the broadcast.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely can feel that, and I always thought the Overwatch community was a little bit weird, just in the way that they sort of approach these ideas of competition. For example, I think we can all agree the Shanghai Dragons that went 0-40 or whatever it was. They're a disgrace. Like, I mean,
everyone should have been fired from that team.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I can't think of another kind of sporting environment where that level of sort of lackadaisical ineptitude would have been sort of turned into a go get him Tiger. It's like it's super Little League where everyone gets a bat, right?
It's just Richard, it's just like a fucking like anime at this point.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
It's just the characters that people like. That's why I kept saying Overwatch League is not an anime, because it's like, oh, I like this character. It's like, it doesn't matter. Your character is bad at the game, and they need to go. And it continues. Why are the Houston Outlaws retiring Jake's number?
That's insane. I mean, that's one of the most cringeworthy things I've seen in esports, because it's like, first of all, your sport is only 3 years old.
2 years old.
This
is the third year.
Sorry, I'm giving them an
He
extra
only
year.
played 2 years. He only played 2 years.
So the idea that retiring a jersey would sort of have any, long-standing meaning anyway for something that's very, in its infancy. But then on top of that, you retire a jersey for the absolute elite level players that have won you trophies.
Yes.
And, Jake didn't do any of that, and there hasn't really been enough time to sort of assess what his legacy would even be. So that is nonsense. That's like LARPing as a sport at that point, right?
Exactly. And this is the kind of hole that they keep digging themselves into, because I feel like the Overwatch League broadcast is just like I tweeted about the Jake thing and said it's jumped the shark. Like this is a level of intellectual dishonesty in sports that, I mean, if I was still there, I would have flipped out. I would have lost my mind if somebody said that to me. And to be fair, I also disagree with my employer, Cloud9, retiring the London Spitfire players' numbers. They did that too. I don't like that either. But at least they won a championship, right?
True.
I don't think anybody should be retiring anyone's number after 2 years. And it's nothing against Jake. I think Jake is a nice guy. Like, I'm happy he's continuing his career as a broadcaster. He's well known and well liked within the Overwatch League community, so it's not any shade on him. But if I was Jake, I would say no to this.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, I wouldn't let them do this, because if the Outlaws are a bad team, and Jake was a mediocre player on a bad team, and he has other great skills and qualities which have led him now to be a caster, but that doesn't mean that your jersey gets retired. Like that is just, I don't even get it, Richard, because these are the traditional sports people who are ostensibly doing this. Shouldn't they know what this means? Where are the colleagues, my colleagues from the Overwatch League? Like, shouldn't they be saying something about this? Like,
well, they can't say anything, can they?
You say that, Richard. You say that. But like, how much intellectual dishonesty are you willing to put up with?
Sure, but I mean, again, okay, if it's I've relocated and I'm living in LA, and I've got a long-standing lease on an LA apartment, which is crippling me financially. And
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, intellectual dishonesty might just be a price that I can live with for a year. I was there with the CGS. I was kind of like, wait, I'm against everything this thing's doing, but they're massively overpaying me to write bullshit. So I'll take the paycheck and pretend I didn't say the CGS was bad before. It was the last time I ever shilled and knowingly shilled, So
it's still a mark on your rep, though. Because like the thing is, from the outside, you can't tell who is like actually. And to me, as a caster, this is, I mean, it sounds silly, but like this is really important to me. Like that, like it deeply disturbs me that this is happening, because it's sort of the collapse of integrity within an entire sport. Like, how can you take anything seriously again?
Well, sure.
You can't do it. It's like, it's super serious. People are like, oh, it doesn't matter. I'm like, it does matter. It matters to the history of this sport. And if we're talking about a sport that's going to continue for many years, like, it really, really matters. It matters.
Yeah, but I also think they know that they're on the clock, right? And because of that, there's this like almost like desire to cram in as many like epic moments before the whole shit comes tumbling down. So it's like, hey, we've not retired any jerseys before. We've never had a ceremony for a player. We might not be here in 2 more years. So fuck it, let's do it. Like, let's do it now and see how it goes over with the audience. And at least we had that epic moment. And I think that's basically Overwatch in a nutshell. It's never wanted to just slowly percolate and take its time like a Counter-Strike has. 20 years, hasn't even peaked yet over 20 years. Open circuit, everyone's welcome. They're not interested in doing that. They want it now, today. They want cash returns by year 3. They're working with VC people who, they're not in for the fucking long haul. Obviously, they're VC people. The definition of VC is you get in, you get out. Maybe you make some money, maybe you don't. But you place enough bets at the table, so you're always up. And that's the whole point. It's very, crash bang wallop, as we would say in the UK.
Well, it's also, I think the like traditional sports teams that are getting in, it's such a small amount of money for them. To operate these things or to purchase them. And also, I think that no matter what happens, that they understand at least that there is a future of esports. This is a way they could get in. And what they're doing is they're developing an expertise on how, and a staff about how to run esports teams. Like, they need training wheels, and maybe this is it. So I'm not sure, I'm just saying, like, I think a lot of these traditional sports teams are going to be here for a long time, but I think a lot of the doom and gloom around Overwatch League is overstated, because people got in for various reasons, whether, like you're saying, it's VC taking a flyer on it, whether it's a traditional sports teams dipping their toes into the space and trying to get some level of expertise for the first time and build out internal teams that are going to gain that knowledge and take it to make Overwatch League better or make new teams better or whatever have you. So I do think that there's value in it no matter what. And I also, it's not going away anytime soon. It won't go away in 2 years. It may be in a very different form, but with Overwatch 2 launching, like, there's no chance that, it'll continue to be there. Maybe in a more stripped down version. Who knows?
Yeah. So we'll start sliding into some CS talk now.
Yep.
So obviously, I think Counter-Strike is the greatest esport.
I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's some out there where I think they don't get their just desserts. They don't get the full respect they deserve. Like, I think Rocket League is amazing, and it's got that beautiful, high skill ceiling, always something to learn.
Super
but
easy to
very
watch.
simple, just so easy as a concept to get, and that's what Counter-Strike has that not a lot of esports do. So this is obviously, for me, I think, a perfect game for you to get into, because you're somebody that's always been interested in the intellectual aspect of competition and the mechanics of games, and this is definitely a game that is going to reward both on the surface level and on deeper analysis. So is that going to be the kind of MonteCristo we see in Counter-Strike? Are you going to be focusing on the analytical elements as you have in MOBAs and RTS and Overwatch? Or is this going to be a very different kind of Monte we see?
So for those people who don't know me, I would say that my top skills in analysis are macro analysis. So what I do is I talk about team tendencies, in-game tactics, positioning. I'm not a micro guy. Like, I'm not the guy who's going to tell you, in League of Legends, this ability interacts with this champion in a very specific way, because I'm not. I think that's a lot of the value that pro players do. Like, I'm not going to tell you the nuances of trading in a lane in this matchup in top lane. Mm-hmm. Or in Overwatch, I'm not going to tell you, these abilities interact with each other in this way, right? But I am going to tell you, hey, in Overwatch, like, this team composition should be used. These are the sort of win conditions of a team comp. This is how this team typically positions. They usually set up a crossfire at this location, and I think this is effective on this map for XYZ reason. Mm. I also am very statistically driven. So for me, whenever I've been casting, like, I was the only caster last year who knew how to use the stats system for Overwatch League, because it was somewhat difficult. Mm. And so I was the one who was doing a lot more stats research. So what I do is I grind film. I rarely play the games that I'm casting, and I grind film to take notes on tendencies and to see, like, how these teams play and describe their play style, describe, their preferred characters for use. Or in Counter-Strike, that would be, when do they buy? What do they buy? Where do they go? Like, how do they attack A when they buy it? These are things that I would be interested in.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, actually, because I'm hoping you can maybe, via Flashpoint, start pushing for better statistics, because the statistics we have in Counter-Strike are absolute garbage.
So terrible.
And it makes no sense, because this is a game that could be like baseball. It's got so many.
100%. So can you tell me why that is? Because I've asked, like, I talked to the casters, and I'm like, so for me, I look at Counter-Strike and I'm like, holy shit, there are so many possible, like, good stats here. Like, if you sat down, and I've been talking to Cloud9 about maybe using, they've got some, like, PhD data scientists that work there, about using them to potentially take a look and develop stats. But I'm curious why stats are so weak in a game where you have all of the data available via demos. And surely somebody could come up with some more interesting metrics than, like, ADR, right?
Yeah, so I think first of all, there was a kind of tech deficit in terms of what you could do with, like, or what people wanted to do with like APIs. We're now seeing a lot of stats, kind of companies that are CS focused kind of implement like very sophisticated methods, as you say, where they can take a demo file, rip out all the
Yes.
relevant stats out of it because it's obviously in there, and lay it out for you. And I think they're vastly underappreciated. This also feeds into the next problem. Or why are they vastly underappreciated? Because the statistical hub for all things Counter-Strike, for as long as Counter-Strike has existed, has been HLTV, and then back when it was relevant as a coverage site, ESEA for North America. I think Gotfrag had it too, but that's lost. I mean, that's literally on some motherfucker's
deleted
hard
from
drive
the internet.
somewhere. Yeah, exactly. That's just gone. Like, so it was very kind of like localized, and in the end, it's HLTV that has persevered. Now, HLTV, I think, they understand their audience, and again, it comes down to that surface level. What do you want to know about? So kills, obviously, damage is a good statistic. That was a new one that kind of came in with CSGO. We never really talked a lot about ADR. It was more of an American thing. In Europe, we didn't really care too much about that. It was kills to death ratio was the shit. And then you get meaningless things like assists, which in CS are so bad. It's not like
terrible.
soccer where, hey, I passed to, I crossed the ball and somebody headed it in. I deserve some credit. An assist can be, you did the hard work. You did 88 damage in 4, and then someone comes in with a 1 bullet finish off. They get the kill. What does that really say? Essentially, you did the hard yards. And then other times it's like you get an assist for just giving somebody a little love tap or
like a frag grenade or something.
Yeah, or a chance nade or something. And like you're getting, so they're not even representative of what you contribute. So they're a terrible statistic. But ultimately what HLTV should have done, in my opinion, is they should have been driving the data. They had all the access. HLTV, they're called HLTV because they created the Half-Life TV mod. They were the people in the position to really usher in a new era of stats. And honestly, back in the day, they were a very small team. I mean, they're still a very small team now. And I just don't think they had the means or the drive to channel their energy into that when, what was driving their traffic wasn't super cool statistics. It was going to every event, getting photographs, getting, doing interviews with players and having the scores and the dates and times of all of the games. That was way more the bread and butter of the site. So that's kind of where we fucked up. The history of CS is basically a missed statistical opportunity, really.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I just look at CS and it has like the weakest stat of any stats game of any esport. And I'm like, why is this? This is like the perfect game for stats. This is amazing. What you can do with demo files, you can also create heat maps of like kills, and like you can literally map out, oh, this team is super good at defending this choke point on this map. Look at how many people they kill in mid on Mirage, right? Like there could be really cool stuff that you could find about that, but it's been used a little bit, but I think that there's a long way to go. And I don't know how much we're going to be doing with that for the first season of Flashpoint, but that's definitely something that I want to do in the future. And yeah, so these are the kind of things that, to go back to your question, these are the kind of things that I really like as a caster. And I've got a lot to learn in that way. And I think at first here, what I'm doing for Flashpoint is I am coming up with a lot of content ideas, and then I'm leaning on current analysts and helping them execute them. So the way I view my role is really to enable the people who are already my friends in this scene, who are already great at doing all of these things within Counter-Strike, and trying to make them shine, whether that's like maybe doing a little bit of desk hosting and doing pre-show and post-show, and making this content with them and helping them figure out how we're going to execute on these things. So that's really where my passion is right now. And then I'll start to get probably more involved, hopefully with the analysis side of things, and we'll just kind of see where that goes. I don't really have ambition to cast outside of Flashpoint, because the rest of my time is I want to keep doing shows. Like Flashpoint's great, but my ultimate ambition is not to cast. My ultimate ambition is to build out more and more and more esports focused shows, and also to move into some general gaming content as well. So I'm really looking at my career trajectory as one of producing cool shit and working towards more entertainment content and like my own show content where I get to talk about games the way I want to with the resources that I have available to me through Cloud9. So I don't think there's a future where I'm like running the CS circuit, right? And like flying all over the world and stuff. But I would definitely love to get more involved in CS analysis down the road and get that level of expertise where I can contribute more meaningfully to analyst conversations within Counter-Strike. But I also just don't want to disrupt the market. Like, I'm not interested in being like, look at me, I'm the new caster who's, coming in and competing with my friends for jobs. Like, my purpose on Flashpoint is to create a cool fucking broadcast and then figure out if and how I can slot into that to make it cool. Because I don't want to fuck it up. Like, I don't want to fuck up Counter-Strike.
No, obviously. But I mean, that's an interesting kind of, point to bring up, is that the cool broadcast element of Flashpoint, I think in the eyes of a lot of people in the CS community, there's been a very sort of weird tribal, kind of mentality descend on a league that, first of all, we haven't even seen a fucking broadcast of it yet. Right.
I think you'll like it.
Yeah, right. Okay. We haven't even seen what the new look ESL is going to look like, and how that's going to play out realistically. And yet people are like, fuck Flashpoint. Thorin saying crazy shit on Twitter, as he always does. So
how's that new?
Yeah, exactly right. So we want Flashpoint to fail. Now, I will say there is this kind of interesting ethos kind of unfolding, right? Like, we can see, Flashpoint decided to go for premium broadcast talent, bring in people like yourself, and they're going to go broadcast first, and hopefully when the monetary aspect reveals itself to be, good, they're going to bring in more teams. So meanwhile, ESL have said, we're going to get the teams. We think people want to watch the best teams, and we don't really care that much who's going to commentate on the games. We think there's enough talent out there in CS anyway that we can still have a top tier broadcast.
I mean, they'll get some good people, obviously.
Yeah, and I mean, I think honestly, they're right. That's certainly my experience, and I'm looking forward to see what opportunities come around for maybe people who've been on the periphery and are like, brutally underappreciated. What's your thoughts on what is more important for the league? Is it the teams? Is it the broadcast? Is there no reason why we can't have both?
Okay, so to go back to Thorin, like, crazy tweeting thing real quick, like, I say that in jest because obviously I think he calls out a bunch of stuff that other people won't call out.
He's got a very important role in the industry.
Yeah, I think so. It's valuable, and I don't think it's crazy, his criticisms of ESL. I think they're actually quite reasonable. Fans just don't want to hear them. As for the broadcast, so I have faith that this group of owners, which consist of some of the very richest teams in esports, will in the long term sign very good players and very good teams.
Yeah.
That's my belief. Obviously, I have no control over that, so it's up to the owners to follow through on that and make my belief a reality. We'll see, obviously. I'm not really concerned with that because I can't affect that. So my concern is, how do we make the most interesting product and interesting broadcast so that regardless of what teams we have, people will really be excited to watch it? And that means that we have to be very entertaining. We have to be unusual, and we have to be surprising in good ways that make it so it's can't miss TV. Because we know, I mean, we're not stupid. Like, we know we are going to have teams that are not at the same level as the EPL right now. That's just true. But I think what we will do is we will provide more analysis. We will provide more hooks. We'll provide more storytelling. We'll provide more fun. We will be looser. We will have a more, I think, we'll have an atmosphere that is more attractive to hardcore esports fans.
Yeah.
We will be more focused for adults. There will be cursing. There will be a lot of banter. We made a format specifically to help players banter and to have that element of it. We will have things like bounties. Like, we will do these things. And I think that what gives me hope is that the NALCS exists and it's
Mhm.
very popular. People are like, oh, I don't want to watch, these other teams. It's like, well, in League of Legends, the LCS is very popular, even though NA teams have always been garbage. They've always been garbage. And I think if you put a good enough broadcast around it and you create a level of loyalty, then you'll be successful. And my belief is let's really focus on the entertainment aspect now.
Mm.
I'm going to do what I can from the creative side to make it compelling. And then on a long enough timeline, I believe the owners will get increasingly better teams in the league. I also think we have some exciting teams in this league that are on the up and up anyway. If you've seen Contact or Mad Lions or Gen G just came off the DreamHack win. These are teams that are relatively fresh, but they've actually shown some potential already. So there's no reason to say that by the end of 2020 that some of one or more of these teams would not be in the top 10.
Yeah.
Right? There's reason to believe that they have a high enough ceiling that could happen. And everything is always in flux in CS anyway. So I think we could be saying a very different story once the league starts if these teams start looking good and they're in one place in Los Angeles long enough to sort of like really practice and like hone their skills. So I think there are reasons to be excited about this, and I'm excited to do it just because I think the broadcast is going to be unlike what people have seen before, and I think you're going to like it.
Do you feel that there's been a little bit of a misstep kind of in how the PR thing has been handled, from the Flashpoint side of things? Because it does seem that I've said this, so I'll be, just completely transparent. I said it to Duncan on the podcast we did together. I think it's very weird that if Flashpoint, the league entity, wants to come out and bang on ESL and say why our league's better, I like that. It's reminiscent almost of WCW and WWF back in the day. So I'm all about that life. Yeah, definitely do that. Where it gets strange, though, is that talent that are going to have to be in the freelance pool are coming out and fighting this battle. And I think when I see tweets from Duncan and tweets from Semler, and I don't know if you've actually tweeted. I think you've been.
I have not.
Yeah, relatively silent on the issue. I think these things are kind of like, guys, like this is a battle that you don't. Not only should you not fight it, you really don't need to fight it, because there are people that should be doing it and making the case publicly, like Dan Fiden's been doing. So I think that has already kind of got people. It's got their backs up a little bit in the community, and I think, in my opinion, I don't think it's something that I would advise any freelance talent to do.
I think that the casters that we have are passionate about this project because we have been given a large amount of control over the creative direction of this broadcast. And we have been included in a way that I have never seen personally from any other production that I have ever been a part of. And that's really exciting. And I think that because this, we finally feel like at last, like we get to make some cool shit for fans. And we're really excited about that. I think that people get defensive over what's happening. And I also think it is important objectively to point out that ESL's model is worse for players. It's worse for the teams. And I believe that.
Yeah.
And so people, I think it's important to get it out there and get the information out there. And, a lot of the PR in my mind isn't even for the fans, it's for the players. And the players influencing where they decide to play and how much they can get from their teams, or how much of the prize pool or how much of the revenue share they can get, it is better in Flashpoint.
Yeah.
Whose job it is to message that, up for debate. I think that one of the valuable aspects of Thorin doing it is that he is a very trusted voice who historically has been critical at personal cost to himself when he knows things have been wrong. You and me and Thorin are all similar in that way, where sometimes we take risks with our careers because we just do, we come up against an ethical wall where it's like, I could say nothing about this and be better off personally, but I can't let this slide.
Yeah.
So Thorin is very, very philosophical, and he knows what he wants out of the industry, and he's going to talk about it. And I think that that's just who he is. And so I'm not sure if I don't think I disagree that he did it. And I think that he has every right to call people out. But I will say this, why I haven't said anything is because I just think we're going to win in the end. Yeah. So my goal is I don't want to fight with ESL. First off, because I don't hate ESL. And second off, because I think the business model with Flashpoint is better. I trust the owners to get the teams, and we'll win on the long timeline. I trust us to make a much better product than ESL in terms of entertainment. So if I believe all these things are true, I'm just gonna let it play out, you know?
Yeah.
So
no, I understand it. I mean, it's like I say, it's that was my advice at this point. You know, ESL, on the rare occasions ESL win a PR battle, they generally win it by saying nothing, and they just let the other person, the other entity, talk themselves into a negative light effectively. I don't think ESL, for example, with what they did with, we're just taking away your EPL slots. Sorry, you qualified for them. We had a written agreement in place, but go fuck yourself, because we need to restructure the league to make it more profitable and service the bigger and better teams. I think that's unforgivable. I think that is an unforgivable sin for all of those teams who were affected. And I did an interview with the guys, and they came and they said, "Oh, we didn't know that teams cared so much about EPL." I was like, guys, like, please, like, this is embarrassing. This is an embarrassing stance to take. But equally, I'll say that I know the community are very surface level and have short memories when it comes to drama. And ESL's been a bedrock of esports. We'd be worse without them. And so I think most people are just kind of like, well, yep, ESL have done a bunch of shady shit to survive. That's how they justify it and essentially control Counter-Strike. But what would we realistically have without them when 80% of the calendar is ESL, and then people fall back into the better the devil you know mindset, right? That seems to be how it is with the community.
I mean, I don't agree with it, and I think that the less pressure on ESL, the worse. Like, I think it's fans should be questioning if this is good for the scene, that they control IEMs and ESL ones, and then the EPL that has a large number of the best teams in the world. Like, think about this. Is this good for the scene? Because I promise you, here's a promise I can make. Both Blast and Flashpoint are going to have better production value than ESL. I promise you that, than EPL. I promise you. And so is it good for EPL to have all these teams? Because if they do, and if their attitude is, well, we're just going to rely on the teams to provide the entertainment for us, you the fans, are getting a worse product. Because they're not going to compete in the same way, because they can't. You know, they're already struggling. We know that from the fact that MTG is a publicly traded company. We know that because the deal with China fell through and it destroyed MTG's stock.
Yeah. An actual, you know, time that using the phrase stock value plummeting is actually,
it was like 34%. It was huge.
It was a big drop.
That's a kick in the nuts right there for sure. And so do you want this company that is in obvious financial distress and will not go the extra mile to provide you with the best possible broadcast in the way that I think Blast and Flashpoint will? Is that where you want the best teams in the world?
Yeah.
My answer is no.
Of course no.
So I think that fans should remain open-minded. I'm not saying don't watch EPL. They're going to have some great games by all means, but come to Blast and Flashpoint and other events that are held with an open mind, because I think you'll be surprised.
So the next question then becomes, we've seen, and this is another reason I think the PR strategy has been a little bit off kilter. If indeed it is a strategy, I'm assuming it's a strategy rather than you've employed a bunch of people who are essentially forces of nature and they're just going to do.
Well, that's part of it, isn't it? That's just esports.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, the PR strategy seems to have been a bit more focused on what ESL does wrong and not what Flashpoint's going to do right, apart from the financial model. So can you give us some insight into some of the cool ideas we're going to see? Because that's what's intrigued me, and I haven't heard anything about it yet, where it's like, trust me, we're going to blow your socks off with our production, but I haven't been given any little teasers about what it's going to be. You know?
I think we're really dedicated. So one of the things that we talk about a lot is how can we put content in there instead of having downtime? Like, I appreciate the fact that Blast kept to the start times, even if it was a 2-0. And scheduling around best of threes is obviously more challenging than scheduling around best of ones. But instead of having a 45-minute countdown timer, we will put content in there. Like, we will make content. And I think that the fundamental philosophy that our producer, who came from season one of, well, he came from Overwatch League, but he did UFC and a bunch of other stuff. He was the guy who did season one of Watchpoint with all our skits. I don't know if you ever saw that, Richard.
Yeah.
So it was actually an extremely good show. Like, as far as esports,
I remember
content,
the XQC one specifically.
Oh yeah, I forgot. But that kind of stuff, like, he was the writer and the producer on that show. And so I think if you watch that, if you imagine that he was held back in certain ways by the IP of Blizzard and like what he could and couldn't do. But I think a lot of the skits we did were really fun, and like that kind of content was spot on, in my opinion. That was probably one of the best experiences I've had in esports, was doing that show. So he's working as the executive producer of Flashpoint. So, and what he realizes too is that he is a traditional sports guy who actually learned deeply Overwatch over 2 years and has been super engaged. Like, when we first got him on, he came over to my house for 8 hours and we just watched Counter-Strike broadcasts and we discussed the game. And so he takes so much time to like learn the community, learn the game, figure out what's good, and then like synthesize his traditional sports background, which I know sounds like what a normal human being should do, but is very rare to actually see in practice. So I do want to do things like the skits. He realized like, the free flowing content, because people in esports who have been here for a long time, we're so used to pauses. We're so used to doing these shows that you and I do, where we just talk on unscripted content for hours, and people love that shit. They love long form content. So what if we dialed back the teleprompters and that kind of bullshit and just trusted in people to have an interesting conversation? And we create a system where it's the entire kind of set is more free flowing, where you can walk from place to place and talk to different people, and get their input on things. Who's there? The kind of ideas like everything is in play in the same way that at WWE everything is in play.
Yeah.
In terms of the tunnel's in play, backstage is in play. It's like, we're going to go back here and the cameras are going to go there. So it's a lot about using the people we have to create interesting discussions and a confidence that we can do that. Also, we want to do things like, I'm directing right now an OGN style hype video. I went and I found the song I want, and then we licensed that track, and then I came up with an idea, and we have artists working on it, and we have storyboards being made, and we have shoot dates planned, and we're going to make something super cool. And I think that Counter-Strike fans are probably unused to seeing things at that level of production quality, and it has taken a significant amount of my time in order to come up with all the concepts and the shot lists and work with a bunch of people on it. And I think that's going to be a hype thing, and I think the players are going to like being presented in that way. When it comes to how the run of show goes, like, Thorin is very involved in that. I'm very involved in that. When it comes to the format, obviously, like, Thorin and I came up with that idea, and I ironed everything out with some help from some people at Cloud9 who were doing some statistics on it to make sure that the playoff points were the right values, and like what were the pluses and minuses of doing things mathematically a certain way in terms of like pick ban or like vetoes, the veto structure for picking teams into groups. Like, these are all things that we've had total control over. Thorin and I came up with the idea. I wrote up all the format rules and gave it back to them, and then we're just doing it. So it is unique in that way, in that the owners are very trusting, and there's very little interference, and the creative freedom is enormous. So these are all different things that we're doing right now that I think are going to play into the broadcast. I can't give everything away, but like, the set is going to be super cool. There's going to be aspects of it that you've never seen in esports before. But I would think of it more as a more loose style structure, in terms of how comments go on. Like, we're not going to have a desk. we're done with that. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think any esports fan is like, oh yay, some dude standing behind the desk. Now I'm going to listen. Like we have the freedom to be more dynamic. And I think that we're trying to seriously think about the esports conventions and whether they're even necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I've said it for years, I always hated the early days of esports where we were just trying to be sports like little brother, like copying everything they were doing, like, singing into your fucking hairbrush in a mirror, It really felt like that's what we were doing, First time I saw people in like a suit and a tie and trying to do that fucking sports center bullshit, I was like, why are we doing this? This is so like isolationist to our audience. And then obviously I went and did a TV show for 2 fucking years and had to do the exact same shit. And I used to say every day, I'd be like, why don't we just have it t-shirts and shorts? Like, so I can feel good and not like dumb, who I am out at the broadcast. And they would go, funny one, Richard. Yeah, wear your fucking tie.
Well, it's also like you can do analysis in many different ways. Like, and when I say there's no desk, I mean, I'm not saying there's no analysis. There's more analysis. There's tons of analysis. Like, I love what Blast did with Skybox and Anders. Like after the show I think Blast did a really good job.
It was a great broadcast.
I think it was really good. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I like what LEC is doing in League of Legends. Like they just released this hilarious skit, I think yesterday, about them playing D&D and pretending to be the teams. And it's just like, what's so good about these skits and what people are learning and what Sean, the producer, brought into Watchpoint was you can frame real information in these skits about, like, you can teach people about the tendencies of Fnatic by pretending to be Fnatic in a D&D game in a fun way. Yeah. And I think that's what the audience wants. Like, analysis is great, but what if we just packaged it slightly differently? Like when we were doing the skits in Watchpoint, we might do like a detective skit, but within that detective skit are real stats that we're talking about. We're just framing the stats in the context of like a whodunit murder.
Yeah.
And that I think is so much better for the esports audience who expects a level of entertainment and fun. And it's more, frankly, it's more fun for us too. I think you'd agree. Like, I love what Beyond the Summit did at CS Summit last time with the Prius and Henry G and Machine, like
the baby
ultrasound. I thought that was fucking hilarious.
Yeah. I was like, I couldn't believe what I was seeing, honestly. I was like, holy shit, this is insane. But yeah, I mean, good on them for doing something bold. I mean, I like Beyond the Summit for that in general as well. I think it's a great, that for me is the kind of environment I also think esports thrives in, where it's like, beer and pretzels is what they used to call it in sort of game design, right? Like, I mean, that's what we are. We're sports fans. We're like, the Barstool model is kind of what we are, right? Like,
right. And you know what's so wacky to me, Richard, is that we look at Beyond the Summit and we look at Take TV and these places that have no money comparatively, yep. And yet they're still doing these big broadcasts, and no one ever fucking stopped to think, who's like a developer, how can they be doing this with no budget? What would happen if we gave them a budget?
Yeah.
They're so obsessed with this traditional sports garbage that no one ever stopped to think like, wow, this like small business is actually crushing it in terms of viewership. Sometimes they're getting more viewers than we do, depending on the game. What is it about them that is so successful? And it's because they have this insane creative freedom, and they've identified, I think, both Take TV and Beyond the Summit in Europe and LA, respectively, have figured out what esports fans want, and they just focus on that. But the fact that no one's actually like taken those people or given them like a good, like a huge budget and just seen what happens is crazy to me. Because they've shown they can do a lot with a little.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of really talented people in esports, because I mean that's how you really know if someone's been in esports a while, because that make do mindset, like being able to do
scrappy as fuck, dude. I love it.
Yeah, that's what we had to do for years. There wasn't any fucking production companies. I mean, it was a guy figuring out how to use shit. I mean, especially in the pre-streaming days, like everyone now has like a Stream Deck and an OBS, and they understand like camera shots and things like this. Like if you're a streamer, you understand this shit. Back in the day, we didn't even have that. It was, it was like. So I look at those broadcasts and I think they're the real sort of that's the real story about esports.
I agree.
Not when the sports guys come in and just turn us into sports too.
Yes, but this is what is exciting about Flashpoint, and I think this is what I think should be really stressed to the fans, is that this is what would happen if people who were endemic esports got money.
Yeah.
That is what is happening. We're looking at the history of esports, which the traditional sports people don't know. The format came from MSL, which is a Brood War format from like 2009.
Yeah.
And we said, this worked really well. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. Now we're going to change some things to make it better for Counter-Strike, and we're going to change it because we have X many weeks of format. And I think the thing that I introduced that was really cool is in an MSL, you do the group selection and then play the tournament. Now you do the group selection, and then you have a mini tournament, and then you do another group selection. And basically, you can do that forever, right? So the more like time we have, the more group selections we can do, which builds up those rivalries of now, oh yeah, that last round, that guy beat me, so I'm bringing him into my group again because like fuck you, I'm gonna take you out this time. So there's a lot more storylines that can develop, but adding more group selections, I think, just takes what's good about the MSL and just like, sharpens it. So we're trying to learn from other esports. And when I say an OGN style hype video, I mean, look at, if you are knowledgeable about the history of League of Legends or the history of StarCraft Brood War, and you look at those hype videos, that is the single best way to condense history, because they were so smart in the way they portrayed the players, the times in their careers, the music they chose, the compositions they created with the players to visualize and symbolize that history, that if you go back and you watch 10 years of Brood War, it actually, like Brood War hype videos or League of Legends hype videos, if I go back in League for you, I can literally tell you what happened every single one just by remembering from the hype videos what the big events were that season. And I can tell you the story of the Korean professional scene. And that is so cool. Yeah. And it would be great if we could start bringing those narratives into something awesome and like making the players look super cool as well. And they really nailed that. So that's one thing that I've always admired OGN for, and unfortunately OGN is not doing so hot these days. Yeah. But I think that legacy really needs to live on, and we need to like, that should be a staple of esports, in my opinion.
So last two questions I got for you. Okay.
Yeah.
So the first one, because I just had to throw this in, or the community will call me a fucking shill and say that I didn't ask the hard questions of my buddy Monte. So obviously we know Cloud9 has a very high level of involvement. We know that you're employed by Cloud9. We know Thorin is also could be, doing content for Cloud9 and being paid to do so.
Yes.
Should we worry about there being a disproportionate amount of attention put on Cloud9, that sometimes the broadcast could spill over into being essentially an advertisement or vanity project for this organization? Now I know, because I've already seen Duncan tweet that this team is shit and needs to make a roster change. So I know it's not going to be like that, but I have to ask.
Yeah, I to be clear, I am a full-time employee of Cloud9, and the way that this works is that they like rent me to Flashpoint. So Duncan is an independent contractor that works on Summoning Insight with me for Cloud9, and then is also, as far as I am aware, I could be wrong, an independent contractor with the League entity. So the League, Flashpoint is his own company, his own separate corporate entity that is collectively owned by the teams. So what happens when I do work on Flashpoint is that they bill Flashpoint for my time. So effectively, like when it comes to Cloud9 bias, first off, they have literally never, they knew, like, you know what you're getting into when you hire me and Thorin to do something.
Yeah.
And editorial control is not going to fly, because that's not what Summoning Insight is. They have literally never said, don't say X about Cloud9, or you must talk about Cloud9 or whatever on Summoning Insight for League of Legends. Never had any feedback like that. And if they tried to, I would say, I'm going to say what I think. And it's the same thing here, which is that I appreciate Cloud9 and the other teams who are co-funding this endeavor, but I don't, like, I have no plans to specifically feature Cloud9 more than any other founding team, or focus on them if they're doing badly in a way that would imply that they are doing well, or vice versa. Like if they're doing super good, like turn them into the kings of the league if there's other competitive teams. I just tell the narratives as I see them, and Cloud9 has never really ever said anything about editorial control when it comes to how their teams are represented. They don't really care.
Yeah.
I think they have a lot of confidence in their own abilities. Like, they're a premier esports organization. They might be the premier esports organization in the West. They're certainly up at the top.
Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly in the conversation. So I think they just know they'll fix their shit if they're bad, and they always have, and there's no reason to believe that they won't keep doing that.
And then the final question is, when we get to the end of the first Flashpoint season and everything's been said and done, what is going to be, in your mind, a success story? What is it that realistically, are the kind of landmarks, the checkpoints that you need to get through in season one to be sat feeling good at the end of it?
I don't really know. I don't really know what to expect from this, because I don't know what our numbers will be in relationship to EPL. I guess for me, it really boils down to, did we accomplish in terms of creativity and tone what we set out to do? Because it's going to be really difficult, because we're kind of breaking new ground in a lot of ways. And like, did it work? It's extremely experimental. So I think it's going to be a pretty serious review of how much fun was it? And for me, that's like kind of the baseline is, what I want people to feel when they watch it is like, I want to feel when I'm on it or when I'm watching it that I'm having a great time, and it's like fun banter, and like I feel super engaged because of the kind of content that's coming out. And I have confidence that with the group of talent that we have, that's going to be accomplishable. And I think with our producers that will be accomplishable. And like, we're hiring people, like we hired a former WWE writer to help like players and casters sort of not like make a fake persona, but sort of like accentuate it in the same way that WWE does. So I think there's a certain larger than life aspect that if it comes naturally and it seems like we can just, make it a little bit bigger, we will, but we're not going to force. So the thing is that the creative behind this project is going to be so reactive to what's happening, what's happening on the broadcast, that it's kind of hard to tell. So I guess for me, it's like, did we react appropriately? Did we bring in the banter at the right times? Was the broadcast flow right? Like, was this the most entertaining thing we could have created given the circumstances? Because I can't predict or I can't predict or expect really what the pro players will say. Like, can we get the pro players to really buy into this? Are they going to be there with some creative banter? Are we going to have some good moments? And then when we have those good moments, how are we going to use them? How are we going to perpetuate them? Can we keep these narratives going? I think that when the players see how awesome things like the hype video are going to look, and how we are so dedicated to presenting them in a cool way. And I think that if we can explain to them that this is going to be an environment where you can banter, and the expectation is that you do, and like kind of like release a little bit and fuck what the fans think. And honestly, I think if we just tell the fans, hey, there's going to be more banter, I think they will be less publicly harsh on the pro players as well. Yeah. So I think it's kind of weird. It's like, if you create, it's like Field of Dreams. It's like, if you build it, they will come. Like, if you build the banter environment, then I think people will just like open up in that way. At least that's what I'm hoping. And then once we can get that, it's really about creating the atmosphere and creating the best possible entertainment broadcast. And that's obviously extremely hard to do. So that's how I'm going to judge it, really. Because if we can do that, and even if we have less viewers than EPL, if we can do that, then I think like once the owners finish their commitment to building up some of the best rosters in the world, then all of a sudden we have the best entertainment product and we have the best teams.
Yeah.
So for me, it's just the product right now. Do people really like it? And how can we optimize it? And that's what I'm excited about doing. So that's how I think I'll judge it. As vague as it is, it's really hard until it actually like gets out there and you see people's reactions, and really you see, my reaction, or like our producer's reaction, or the other caster's reaction. Like, is this what we dreamed of, or how are we going to change it. But there's so much agency from the talent in this project that I think that we can iterate on it pretty quickly and then like make some cool stuff. I mean, I think it's really exciting. I think it is a very bold experiment that's about to take place in a way that hasn't really existed in esports in any country ever. So who knows? At least not with this much money behind it.
So how I usually end these things is kind of, if you've got anything that you need to plug, if you've got a book coming out or, that sort of thing, where are fans
recently?
Yeah. I might be working on, I've already sort of got one half done. The publishers don't want to run with it for some reason. I can't think why. But anyway, where
are they afraid they're going to get Hulk Hogan?
Yeah, maybe just a bit. I'm on Pete Thiel's good side, I think. So, what are you going to be up to next? Where can fans of yours sort of tune in? I know you've obviously got regular content flow, but mainly for the CS guys, because I know you coming into CS has actually been met with a fanfare.
I was surprised.
Contributed nothing and good riddance. The CS guys are like, yeah, we'll fucking take that guy, no problem.
I have been really pleasantly surprised by that. Like I thought it would be good just because I think my personality and like style fits CS nicely, but I didn't expect it to be as good or like as welcoming as it was. So that's been really pleasant. We're doing the Flashpoint Q&As on Mondays. I think usually they're 12 Pacific, 9 Central European time. This week, I think we're doing 11 Pacific. So it'll be on Monday. And so that's an opportunity for you to ask questions about the league to me, Thorin, whoever we've had on. We had Dan Fiden on. So we're really trying to be transparent with that kind of stuff and make sure that people have an opportunity to say like, well, I have this hard question, but if we have an owner on there, they will answer it. We really just want to be as open with the community as we can about this project, which is something that I think our competitors are not doing because their deals are not as good. And when they come under scrutiny, it's not great for them. But we're confident in our project and we're confident in our deals. So why not just shed as much light on them as possible? So doing that for Counter-Strike, probably continue that in some podcast form during Flashpoint as well on Mondays. I think we will just continue doing a podcast because I don't think we have many broadcasts planned on Mondays as it is right now. Obviously, you'll see me. I mean, I'm going to be spending 80 hours a week working on Flashpoint stuff, both in front of camera and behind the scenes during our actual run, starting in March. So that's coming right up. So look at that. And then at the end of the season, I think I'll take a step back and be like, what makes sense for me to do in Counter-Strike at that point in time? And I don't know the answer to that because that will depend on what's going on with Flashpoint. I will certainly be working on the next season of Flashpoint, but that's more, again, behind the scenes stuff. So, I'm just kind of playing it by ear right now and seeing where I slot into this because I don't want to demand myself.
That was quite a thing.
I feel really bad. Like I like Lee a lot, so it's a bummer, but
also avoidable.
It was avoidable, and I would like to avoid that. Let's put it that way.
I think you'll negotiate the territory with.
Well, it's also that I don't want to step on the toes of the fans. I've been friends with like you and so many of the other Counter-Strike casters for so long, and I have immense respect for what you guys all do. So it's like I don't want to like start doing weird shit that like is to the detriment of the broadcast when somebody who's much more knowledgeable or smarter about the game could be talking about it instead of me.
Yeah.
So I think I can facilitate discussions. I think I can activate a lot, like ask the good questions to get the good information out. But I don't want to. I am not currently in a place to provide that information at the level to which people in other games are accustomed to me providing. So it's a different role for sure.
Well, look, always a pleasure to catch up, even if we're doing it, on work time rather than, casual.
We should come to LA.
I know. People keep telling me that. I'm trying to avoid it, like for as long as possible. But
I'm trying to avoid it too. But I have to live here, so
I will actually be over there in end of March. So
great!
I'll look you up. I'll stay out there for a few days against all my good judgment. And, I'll hit you up for a beer or two. But anyway, look, thanks so much for your time. And guys, that is, of course, MonteCristo. I'm sure you know him, but if you don't, if you are new to Counter-Strike, because, hey, we're getting new people coming in all of the time, be sure to go and follow him on Twitter, and do follow Flashpoint. I'm going to. I think the community reaction to competition has been a little bit perplexing. I think when all is said and done, I think we'll be enjoying the broadcasts, and Monte's going to be a big part of that. So thanks to everybody for tuning in to Rivalries CS channel. There's going to be more content like this right here, so make sure you do subscribe to it, and I will see you next time.